Guys, breaking news, Lanorris Sellers, apparently not a good passing quarterback. When I say breaking news, I am being facetious because this is just the latest lazy narrative about Lanorris Sellers in South Carolina that we are going to debunk in the next 30 minutes. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked on Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked on Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, and I hope everyone's having a fantastic Monday, as I always say, if that's even possible. We got a good show for you today. Before we get into it, I do want to say thank you to everyone making Locked on Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Head on over to the Game Time app today. Download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. You don't have to make a purchase to come watch what's going to happen here today, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. And the topic for today is the latest. And I'm struggling for the words right now because I'm just going to be very honest with you guys. Outside of this podcast, I don't have the most PG filter when I talk. And it is difficult to sit here. Pepper's in the background. She's pissed. You can see her. What's wrong with you? But I don't have the most PG filter. I'm having a very hard time figuring out how to keep a PG filter talking about this subject matter today. And it is the newest lazy narrative about Lanorris Sellers and South Carolina. And it's primarily about Lanorris Sellers. And it's funny because I brought this up on Friday when I was on radio in Charlotte. And what we're going to talk about today is this. We're going to talk about the narrative. We're going to debunk the narrative. We're going to tell you all the stats and numbers that show you why this is a lazy and stupid narrative and what you can expect moving forward in a year two of growth for Lanorris Sellers going into, this season. Also, we're going to talk about some news that came out from the New York Times and The Athletic today of an article about Bruce Feldman discussing some of the crazy things that happened in the offseason about Lanorris Sellers and NIL. And some of you are going to owe me an apology. You're not going to give it to me, and I'm sure you've forgotten about it by now, but just know that I haven't because I'm petty. But those are the topics we're going to get into today. Let's start here. I brought this up on radio the other day, and I didn't think it had really gotten very big yet, like this narrative. And then I saw it all weekend. For some reason. The narrative is Lanorris Sellers is not that good of a passing quarterback. The other narrative is, he's just Jalen Milroe 2.0. The other narrative is, he's only a good runner. That's the thing. He's just a good runner that is able to throw the football. I'm having a hard time not using cuss words because that is one of the dumbest effing things I have heard about Lanorris Sellers in any assessment of him. Now let's start with the objective part of this, looking at some of the negative to his game that feeds into this as truth in quotes. He started off very poorly last year. Like he had a very tough start to the season. That's totally fine. We're looking at the numbers as a whole, though. We're not just looking at September. You look at September, and you want to see what he ranked and where he rated. He was 54.7% completion percentage in those 3 games. Remember, he didn't play the one game where Robbie Ashford had to come in for him after the LSU game. It was against Akron. Only 2 touchdowns to the air, 2 interceptions, 54.7 completion percentage, only 7.4 yards per attempt, 393 total yards. I mean, it was not great. The 54.7 completion percentage is where I'm gonna hone in on here, though, because this is what I think that people are saying. And let's get this out of the way. There's a reason. Pepper just really enjoying herself back here. There's a reason why the narrative of not just Lanorris Sellers, but quarterbacks similar to Lanorris Sellers that look like Lanorris Sellers, that play like Lanorris Sellers. There's a reason why the narrative is well, he's just a good runner and he's not a good passer. There's a reason behind it. We're not going to get into it. We're not going to get into what it is because it's a lazy narrative. And it's been happening for decades where it's like, oh, this guy's really fast. He's really athletic. Clearly, he's a run-first guy. Probably can't throw the football that well. Like, how about Jalen Milroe? Jalen Milroe had one of the best deep balls out of anyone in the country. Jalen Milroe had the second highest yards per attempt out of anyone in the country. Jalen Milroe had like one interception. Up until the Oklahoma game this year, he had one interception, one turnover in his last like 6 games in the month of November alone, right? So there's a reason why quarterbacks that look like Lanorris Sellers and play like Lanorris Sellers get this bad rap. And I'm not going to get into all the reasons why. I'm not going to get into any of the weird stuff why. I will say that when somebody is that athletic, I think that dumb, casual football fans are not able to look at this and say, well, he's good at 2 things. It is because most of this is coming from outside of the fan base, right? So there's already a level of you trying to discount how good this kid is because you don't want it to be true. You just don't want it to be true. And that's fine. Listen, we've all done that in our own fandom. I think there was a time when I was like, I don't think Deshaun Watson's that good. He had 13 interceptions in the regular season. He's not that good. Yeah, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country that year. But like, when you're starting from a foundation of, well, he can't be that good because, instead of what are the things that he does extremely well, and then we'll start looking at some of the stuff he doesn't do as well. There is this level of want from outside fans, and especially Clemson fans, and especially fans from around the SEC that do not think that this kid is any good because of the way he plays, how he looked very early on, and that's about it. I said this last year. I said, listen, there's a lot of people that when South Carolina lost to LSU or South Carolina lost to Alabama, they turned off South Carolina games for the most part for a while. And then you start thinking about, well, when else was he on, when was he in these primetime moments? That A&M game was on ESPN. It was awesome. He didn't have a great game against A&M, like statistically speaking. They beat the crap out of him, but he didn't have a great game necessarily. Vanderbilt, nobody's watching that. It was like a 4 o'clock game on SEC Network. They beat the crap out of him. It was 28-7. Who cares? Who's going to watch Vandy in the rain? Missouri, SEC Network game, late at night, or a 4 o'clock game maybe? I think it was a 4 o'clock game. That when it was one of the best games of the year, but people weren't watching that closely in regards to watching that over Tennessee, Georgia, or Bama, Oklahoma, or whatever. There's people that were not tuned in and they had seen what they wanted to see from him, and they were done. And this is where the comp to Jalen Milroe actually makes sense, because Jalen Milroe going into last year or in his 2023 year, people watch the Texas game and they're like, this kid sucks. He's not very good. And then they didn't see the rest of the year and the progression he made. Progression is all Lanorris Sellers did and made throughout last year. Like anybody with 2 eyes and a brain could watch this happen. Now, if you want to sit here and say, well, he's not as good of a passer as he's a runner, fine. I personally think he's really good at both, but I do know that he ran for 850 yards last season. 550 of them were after contact. Like, he's a freak. He's a freak. But the idea that he is not a good passer simply because he's really good at the other thing involving his body, which is his legs, and the other aspect of being a quarterback, which is evading the rush, being able to elude people in the pocket, stand up in the pocket, see things downfield, just because he's really good, really, really good at one of those things doesn't mean he's bad at the other. And that seems to be something that is inconceivable for the casual fan. When we come back, quick little break here, I'm going to get into all the numbers that show you exactly why this is stupid. And not just stupid, but really blanking stupid. Because all of the numbers you look at in Lanorris Sellers' last season point to the fact that, oh my God, like, it's a simple Google. It's a simple Google to look at this and say, man, this kid actually is a lot better of a passer than I thought. So when we come back, we will talk about all that and more shortly after this break. All right, before we get into this part of the show, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at the Game Time app. You guys have heard me talk about Game Time before. You're going to hear me talk about them again, especially as we're getting closer and closer to the season, because there's no one better at their job than game, like, well, in the ticket industry, than game time, okay? There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats. Even for the biggest playoff games, prices on the app actually drop closer to kickoff or tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. Listen, I was just on the app not too long ago. The Zone deals were offering 10% off exclusive Zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matchups. I personally can't wait for this. I'm a little bit PO'd because we are just moved to Atlanta a couple months ago, back here where I'm from. I am now moving away from Atlanta in August, and we're going to not be here for the World Cup. But make no mistake about it, I will be back here for the World Cup because I can't wait for it. And I will be back inside of those games thanks to our friends at the Game Time app. Listen, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time, okay? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. I'll make you a guarantee. Back into this talk about Lanorris Sellers. Let's just this is the thing. I'm trying to figure out where to start this attack, okay? Because the idea that he's not very good at passing is a very short-sighted one. Let's look at his numbers from last year, okay? Here's the numbers from last year. Finished up 65.6% completion percentage, 2,534 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a quarterback rating of 151.93. Just under 25 attempts per game, and then 211.2 passing yards per game. Passing yards per attempt, 8.5. I believe that about does it, okay? Like on the year, just under 300 attempts, 196 completions and 299 attempts. Listen, let's also keep in mind that he missed, like the very start of the year, he was underwhelming in the first part of the month, and he didn't have to be great against Kentucky. He missed half of the LSU game, which I think we all know at this point, and you know how I feel about it because I haven't let it go. I think they win that game if he plays. And then also, what do you call it? The idea, or that he missed the Akron game, right? And then he comes back and plays the rest of the way. I watched him in one of the most miserable 60 minutes of football that I've seen for South Carolina in quite some time. He grew up in the Ole Miss game. There was a look on his face during the Ole Miss game that was very obvious that he was intent on that butt whooping being something he could learn from. Okay. So those are all the numbers. Why don't we get into where those numbers stood? Because he's not a very good quarterback, guys. Here's the thing. 65.6% completion percentage. That's not that great, right? Oh, it was third. It was third in the conference. It was actually right behind Quinn Ewers, right? Who was 65.8. He was 0.2% behind the number 2 overall quarterback in the conference in completion percentage, okay? 8.5 yards per attempt. That's also top 5, guys. Top 5. 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. How about that quarterback rating? Oh, that was good for third in the conference, right? 151.93, ahead of Quinn Ewers, ahead of Jalen Milroe, ahead of Carson Beck, Nico, Diego Pavia. Oh, Garrett Nussmeier, where was he? 10th. He was 10th. Brady Cook, everyone's favorite game manager, he was 12th, right? He was right behind DJ Lagway and Jackson Dart for that. Now, yards per game, yeah, he's not going to blow you away with the yards per game. It's a 211.2 yards per game because that's not what this team does, okay? But when you talk about how good he was, and especially towards the end of the season, you look at the month of November alone. He like the word I keep going to, progression. The first month as a starter, not great. He was fine in some of his games, but it was there was a lot left to be desired. In the month of August and September, 2 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, right? The quarterback rating, 121.91. They were only letting him throw the ball 17.7 attempts per game, and he only had 131 yards per game. Completion percentage, 54.7. None of that is ideal. None of that's great, right? Let's move in October. October, you had some hiccups and some growing pains. The Ole Miss game was tough. He started to really show how much he was growing up against Alabama. like I told you earlier, statistically speaking, didn't have a great game against A&M, but you won that game 24-0. And it's funny to me because what we're basically trying to do here is like the argument that he is not good as a passer just because of his legs, like those two things feed off each other a great deal. And the idea that this kid is a finished product, for one, is another one of the dumbest things I've heard, because we've only seen the scratching of the surface with Lanorris Sellers. Make no mistake about it. We have only seen the scratching of the surface with this kid. I mean, he's a first-year starter in the toughest conference in the country. He's behind an offensive line that gave up 41 sacks. It was the second most in the entire conference. I mean, like, he's throwing to receivers that you know as well as I do, and he knows, and the coaching staff knows, is nowhere near as deep or talented as the guys he's going to be throwing to this year. So you tell me that these numbers somehow are all just a ruse, right? He goes in the month of October. And I just told you, in August and September, he had 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Finishes October, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Not great, but still progress, okay? 3 games in each month. Remember, because they had that weird off week in October. I think they had 2 or something like that. I don't know. But he has 3 games in the month of October. So he goes into the month of November. These are his passing numbers, right? His rating is right around 125. He's throwing for about 161 yards per game. The yards per attempt is right around 7. And the completion percentage jumps up to 67.8. But again, you're only throwing for 191 yards per game. Then you go to the month of November. And this is where I think this entire fallacy is so stupid, okay? Because you go to the month of November, and you know, just like I do, what was facing in the month of November. It was terrifying, right? Right? You win at Oklahoma, and you beat the crap out of them. You get 9 sacks. You're up 21-0 in the first quarter. You've scored in every phase of the game. You got a fumble return for a touchdown, interception return for a touchdown. You've scored on offense. Like Dowell Loggins somehow in his bag a little bit with some of the design plays they're running. So then you get A&M at home, top 10 team, 7-1, just off a huge win against LSU. Marcel Reed coming into his own. You beat him by 24. That's your first ranked opponent, top 10 ranked opponent, right? Then you have Vandy, who's ranked at the time. Then you have Mizzou, who's ranked. Then you also have I think it was like Furman or somebody like that. Maybe it was Wofford. I can't remember. And then you have Clemson on the road. You've closed the year with 4 ranked teams in their last 6 games that were ranked at the time. You were an underdog against OU going into that game. You were an underdog against A&M. You were, I think, maybe a slight favorite against Mizzou, a very slight favorite against Vandy, and you were an underdog against Clemson. You won every single one of those games. And by the way, I just told you, through 2 months of the season, my man had 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. What did he do in the month of November when 4 of your 5 games were against ranked opponents? When you were trying to close out and you were just trying to get to a bowl game. Like that's what's inside, like in front of you. You're trying to beat a Missouri team that you have had horrible luck against. Like, you think about the A&M game, you're like 1-8 against them in the last 9 games, right? Missouri, I think you've lost 5 in a row to Mizzou or something crazy, right? Like Eli Drakewitz and Mizzou fans talk about how it's Shane Beamer's daddy and like all this. And then there's Clemson, which you've beaten 1 time in a decade. That's what's facing you and this kid who's not a good quarterback, right? Going in November. He goes 67% completion percentage, 10.4 yards per attempt, 181.8 quarterback rating, which would have been the highest of any quarterback in the SEC, 25 attempts per game, 261 yards per game, right? 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. You entered the month with 5 total touchdowns on the season. You had 12 in November alone. You entered the month averaging 160 yards per game. You increased that by 100 just through the air. Again, the idea that this kid is not a good passer because he's so good with his legs is hysterically stupid. It's hysterically stupid. And here's the other part of it too. You want stats. If you want to get outside of the norm, the box score stuff that I just told you, how about we look at some other stuff? Because the other argument I hear is, he's not a very good downfield passer. Oh, he's not? I'm glad you brought that up. You know, he was top 5 in the country in accuracy and completion percentage on attempts 20 yards or more downfield. He's over 52%. The only people he was behind were people like Dylan Gabriel, who just got drafted, Will Howard, who won a national championship at Ohio State. Those are the people he was behind. And he was top 5 in the country, not the SEC, not for freshmen or first-year starters, in the country. Top 5 in the country. 20 on attempts, 20 yards or more downfield. Every single time these idiots have moved the goalposts, or like the ignorant media that have assessed this kid and have created this narrative. He's a great athlete, dude, great athlete. Still a lot of work to do passing. I don't even disagree with you on the lot of work to do from the passing game, because he's a first-year starter and he's playing in the toughest conference in the country. And all he did in year one, right? All he did in year one was say, you know what? Toughest conference in the country. It's not Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama. It's none of those teams that had the longest active winning streak to close the regular season. It was South Carolina. It's because of Lanorris Sellers. He was over 71% completion percentage in his last 6 games. 17 touchdowns total, 4 interceptions, 12 touchdowns through the air. Throwing for 260 yards per game. I mean, like, what are we even talking about at this point? Like, great against ranked opponents, 68% completion percentage. His completion percentage against ranked opponents was 6 points higher than it was against unranked opponents. His yards per game higher against ranked opponents than it was against unranked opponents. Nearly the same amount of touchdowns through the air. I mean, what are we talking about? Like at every single metric, he was great. Losing by 1 to 7 points or tied. 69.8% completion percentage in that scenario. 6 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. How about this? How about when it matters most, taking care of the football, running, like when you're in the red zone? 9 touchdowns. 9 of his 18 touchdowns came in the red zone, right? Driving down to score, 1 interception all year in the red zone. Didn't turn the ball over down there. The knock on Lanorris Sellers, if you want to make one, is he needs to get better with his legs protecting the football when he's running. Not he needs to be a better passer. He could definitely improve in passing and all that kind of stuff. And guess what, guys? Everything around him this year went up, besides maybe the tight end position, which we don't even know because of who they're bringing in there, are higher-ranked recruits and big-time players. Every position around him has been elevated. Your left tackle going into year 2 is a former blue-chip prospect. You went and got the 3rd or 4th best running back in the entire portal, top 50 player overall at running back. Your receivers, Nick Harbor, first year he's actually saved the entire year where he didn't run track, did anything like that, so he hasn't missed spring ball. He's gotten rep after rep after rep. Then you went and got arguably the best receiving class in the recruiting world of any school in the country. Everything around him is elevated. You don't think that he is going to be elevated as well? On top of all that, another year in the weight room, another year practice, another year with his fundamentals, all those things. This kid is on the verge of being an absolute star. And the worst part about this stupid narrative is it's not going to go away. It's not. Because dumb people have always been dumb. And the idea that he's not a good passer because he's really good at running, or he's not a good passer, if we're being honest, we'll filter it through the truth factor here, right? Give him some truth serum. Why is he not a good passer? I don't like him. I don't like his team. His team beat me. He beat me. One of those answers. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Like, that's where this is coming from. Because there's no way you could have 2 eyes and a brain, like I said earlier, and look at him and say, he is not a very good passer. Not over the full sample size. Not over the entire body of work. Otherwise, how did we get those numbers? They made up. They weren't against the worst competition. It wasn't like he boat raced a bunch of bad teams in September, inflated all of his numbers. No. All that happened against the toughest competition he faced. His game raised when his team needed it most and when the competition raised. It's a joke. I mean, it's crazy. So the idea that Lanorris Sellers is not a good passer, I hope that is put to rest by what I just told you. You saw where he ranks in the SEC. I told you where he ranked nationally. You heard his numbers in general. And by the way, get the digs in now. Because if you think he's not going to get better going into this season, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona I would love to sell you. When we come back, I'm going to tell you real quick, one of the reasons why I think we could have done a whole show on this. Not only is he an elite, one of the best players and athletes ever come to this program, he might be the most special player this program has had, considering what he turned down this offseason. Locked On Gamecocks continues right after this. All right. I'm going to close out the show real quick with something I alluded to earlier. And this was, I remember doing this show in December, and you guys got, not everyone, but some people got really mad at me. And I understand why. And I knew it wasn't personal. I knew it was misguided. But I remember there were several people, one in particular, and I wish I remember the name, that said, I'm never going to watch this show again because you were saying this and it's a lie and it was blah, blah. And it was me saying that other schools were going to come after Lanorris Sellers. And they did. I told you before, like Auburn offered him between $2 and $2.4 million flat out. Trust my source on that. Guarantee that's what happened. Him coming back on Christmas Eve of last season to announce that he was staying in South Carolina was huge, just huge. And I said this earlier, and maybe part of me is saying it. I don't want to say embellishing, but maybe I'm saying it in an exaggerative way because I'm so excited about it, right? There's a word for that. I can't remember what it is. Somebody that's smarter than me, tell me in the comments what the word is. But like where you exaggerate something out of excitement, even though it might not be completely accurate. But it's an opinion, so I can't be wrong about it necessarily. George Rogers, Jadeveon Clowney, Lattimore, Corey. I mean, like there's just so many good players and important players that came through here. Connor Shaw. There's so many good players that came through here, right, over the years that I think are like special players. You could argue that Lanorris Sellers already is the most special player that has ever come to this program. And you could do that because of what he has done already in this current era of college football. Bruce Feldman did an article today about Lanorris Sellers and this kid bursting on the scene, how good he is. And the article was talking about how when he was, after last regular season came in, he was being heavily pursued by a lot of schools. And the report was, I'm going to make sure I'm having this right, he did not name the school, but there's a school that offered, this is his dad saying this, the school that offered him $8 million, which was contingent on Sellers playing 2 more years in college. Right off the bat, I'm trying to think of who that would be. It has to be Duke or Miami. And Duke may sound crazy. Remember, Duke gave a 2-year, $8 million deal to that kid from Tulane, Mensah, or whatever his name is, the quarterback. So it would make sense. But either way, he turned that down. And the quote he had on it, is, I feel like, the stuff of kind of like legends, right? Story published on June 16th by The Athletic revealed that one school offered him $8 million to transfer, okay? His quote on this: I've been playing football all my life for free. We didn't come here to make money. That's what his dad said. We came here to get our education, play ball, and with schools calling, we're not going to jump ship because they're offering more than what we're getting. If it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Was Shane Beamer worried that he would leave? It's a challenge with colleges offer younger guys that kind of money. Who's going to say no to $8 million for 2 years? They're going to be swayed if you don't have the right people in your corner, right? But Shane Beamer also pointed out the fact they have a really good situation in place with him on and off the field. He knows what he means to this state. I got chills reading that, man. I got chills reading that because this is a kid from Florence, South Carolina that came down here, and he said, why would I leave? I love what we have here. Like I love my teammates, my brothers. My literal brother is here. Why would I leave to go play somewhere else? And I know that 5 years ago, that would not be as big of a story. But you think about now, in this day and age, guys, think about even the fact that of what Beamer brought in at the quarterback position to be behind him. There's some quarterbacks and players that wouldn't have the ego to be able to have that happen just to be in the same room with that kind of competition. They just want to be handed it right away. And for this kid to be this solid foundationally in who he is, his skill set, and where he's at and where he wants to be, I truly think by the time he is done at South Carolina, whether that's this year or next, I think he might go down as one of the most important players in this program's history. Because this kid, in this day and age, at the cusp of all these changes where people, you saw Carson Beck leaving to go to Miami just to get a payday, Nico trying to get all that money out of Tennessee, he had the option to leave if he wanted to. I mean, he had the option to go play elsewhere in this conference and get more money. And his valuation is $3.7 million. He's getting $2.7. Now, maybe there's more money involved in that. I don't know. But his valuation is $3.7. He's taking $1 million less than that. He was offered $8 and decided to stay. It just speaks volumes about this kid. And I can't wait. I cannot wait to see him 77 days from now light up every one of these dumb blank fans and media and rival coaches that have somehow insisted after watching all this tape, I don't think that kid's that good. You're going to find out. You're going to find out the hard way. So that is all for today's episode on Locked On Gamecocks. I appreciate you guys. A little bit longer than usual, but I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back again tomorrow with another episode. And I appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all then. Till then, go Cox.